Mizell. This is a very difficult day for all of us. We are here to announce that a very prominent leader in our community, Rabbi Yisroel Goldstein, pleaded guilty today in federal court to fraud charges. I will summarize the fraud crimes covered in the plea and will explain them in more detail using a PowerPoint at the conclusion of my remarks. You will then hear from FBI Agent Mizell, then Special Agent Corner, and then we will have questions which will primarily be answered by the lead prosecutor in the case, Emily Allen. Among other fraud crimes, Goldstein admitted today under oath that for many years, while he was the director of the Chabad of Poway, he received millions of dollars in alleged contributions to the Chabad and affiliated charities, but he secretly refunded 90% of those donations back to the donors. After Rabbi Goldstein prepared and provided the donors with fake receipts, the donors then illegally claimed huge tax deductions for these fake donations, and Rabbi Goldstein kept for himself 10% of the donations, which over the course of this fraud totaled more than $600,000. We call this the 90-10 tax fraud scheme. 5 taxpayers who participated in this scheme with Goldstein also entered guilty pleas in federal court this week. They admitted under oath to knowingly participating in this 90-10 fraud scheme by either recruiting fraudulent donors, concealing their own donations, and or making false deductions on their tax returns. One taxpayer, defendant Bruce Baker, admitted that he has been participating in this 90-10 tax scheme with Goldstein since the 1980s. And he has made several $1 million in fictitious donations over the years. It is important for all of you to know that this investigation began in November 2016, approximately 28 months before Rabbi Goldstein was shot and wounded during the April 27th, 2019 attack on the worshipers at the Poway Chabad. As you know, we have filed civil rights and federal hate crime charges against Mr. John Ernest of Rancho Penasquitos for that shooting, and that case is pending. The FBI and the IRS executed search warrants at Mr. Goldstein's home and at the Chabad of Poway in October 2018, 6 months before the shooting. And shortly after the searches, Goldstein began to cooperate with federal law enforcement. He has been preparing to plead guilty since late 2018. This was an elaborate, long-term scheme that involved careful planning, attention to detail, and significant deception, all to give the appearance of legitimate donations to the Chabad and lawful deductions. The total of 6 plea agreements entered into this week, which includes Mr. Goldstein's, provide a detailed description of the 90-10 fraud conspiracy involving approximately 20 people, and other individuals are still under investigation in this case. In addition to the 2010 tax evasion scheme, Rabbi Goldstein also orchestrated frauds on the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, the California Office of Emergency Services, a private foundation, and at least 3 Fortune 500 companies. I will explain each of those crimes in a moment. Sadly, the facts of this case show a willful effort to deceive on the part of a trusted community leader. Evading taxes causes harm not just to the government, but to all citizens who are forced to bear a heavier burden. Members of the Chabad of Poway were also victims of this crime, for those fake donations certainly did not benefit the congregation. There is no doubt that Rabbi Goldstein was the victim of a horrific hate crime that terrorized him and the worshipers at the Chabad in April of 2019. That event was a significant mitigating factor to the final plea agreement, but it is no excuse. We cannot look the other way because a perpetrator of a crime becomes suddenly a victim of a crime. We commend Mr. Goldstein and his community leadership after the shooting, as well as his cooperation once this investigation came to light. But the illegal conduct had occurred for many years, and it cannot be ignored. I would like to at this time commend the IRS, the FBI, and the members of this office for their incredible hard work and dedication on this case. I am proud of all of law enforcement that worked so hard on a very difficult case. I would now like to go through a slide presentation that will describe the several frauds that I've referenced and the activities of the other 5 defendants who pled guilty this week. As I said, we will talk about 3 different fraudulent schemes. The 90-10 tax deduction conspiracy, which began in the 1980s, a corporate matching donation fraud since 2010, and a grant and insurance fraud since at least 2010. Those are the 3 frauds that Rabbi Goldstein orchestrated and pled guilty in the factual foundation today. Just as a review, this investigation started in November of 2016. Very important. He learned of the investigation in October of 2018 when the search warrants were executed, both his home and his office. And he began cooperating after the investigation and with the investigation once these search warrants were served. 6 months is very important. These search warrants were executed 6 months before the April 2019 shooting at the Chabad of Poway. Now let's just talk you through the 90-10 tax deduction conspiracy. We have a donor. That donor makes out a check, hypothetically, in this case, for $100,000 to the Chabad, which is controlled by Rabbi Goldstein, controls all the finances of the Chabad. He, Rabbi Goldstein, prepared a receipt to that donor, which he signed, which justifies the donation for purposes of tax. He then funnels $90,000 back to the donor. He keeps 10% or $10,000 himself, and the donor makes a $100,000 tax deduction, which they report to the IRS. That is how the 90-10 tax deduction conspiracy operated. I want to tell you about one particular egregious tax donation under this fraud. We'll call this taxpayer EA. This taxpayer donated $1,160,000 to the Chabad of Poway in December 2017. Goldstein converted $1 million to gold coins and secretly returned those coins to EA. That's how EA got his money back, $1 million in gold coins. 10% of that was $160,000, which was kept by Mr. Goldstein. In October of 2018, after the search warrants were executed, EA discovered the investigation. And in order to cover his tracks, he returned the gold to Goldstein to try to conceal the fraud. Goldstein has forfeited that $1 million in gold to the United States as part of his plea agreement. And there is a picture of $1 million in gold coins. The summary of this 90-10 tax scheme: at least 12 taxpayers were involved in the scheme. The donations totaled $6.2 million, at least. Goldstein kept 10%, approximately $620,000. The tax loss to the IRS on this scheme alone was at least $1.5 million. Now let's move to the corporate matching donation fraud. As you all know, many corporations offer matching donations by employees in order to incentivize contributions, charitable contributions. This is the way this fraud occurred. A donor here, hypothetically, makes a check for $25,000 to the Friendship Circle. The Friendship Circle was a nonprofit organization. Each chapter is financially independent of all other chapters. And the one associated with Rabbi Goldstein and the Chabad, he controlled the bank accounts of the Friendship Circle. The donation is made to that entity, and then the corporation makes a matching $25,000 donation to the same entity. Goldstein would funnel the entire $25,000 back to the donor, who obviously would also make a $25,000 deduction on their tax form. And the $25,000 from the corporation, the matching amount, went to Goldstein. This is the corporate matching donation fraud. Summarize it: at least 6 co-conspirator employees knowingly participated from 2010 to 2018. At least 3 Fortune 500 companies were defrauded. They had no idea that the money they were also contributing and matching their employee was going straight to Rabbi Goldstein. He secretly funneled all of their donations back to the employee. The taxpayers, the donees, claimed fraudulent tax deductions, and the Fortune 500 companies that relied on this false information made at least $134,000 in matching donations, which all went to Mr. Goldstein. The third fraud is the grant and insurance fraud. There are 4 instances of this fraud which were contained in the factual foundation. The first one involved the 2007 San Diego wildfires. Goldstein and his co-conspirator, Alexander Avergoon, they conspired to create fake invoices from Avergoon's phony construction company called the Imagination Construction Company, allegedly to repair fire damage from the 2007 wildfires. The damage never happened. Goldstein took these invoices and submitted them to FEMA and Cal OES, Office of Emergency Services. And in 2010 and 2011, they wrote checks, totaling $185,537 from those agencies directly to Mr. Goldstein, who kept that money. As I said, 4 separate instances. I'll run through these quickly. The first one we've already discussed occurred in 2011 and 2010, attributing alleged damage to the 2007 wildfires. The second one was from the Office of Emergency Services, a grant in 2012 for alleged facility upgrades, which involved security upgrades. Cal OES required both invoices and proof of payment in order to make a payment. Goldstein again asked his friend Alexander Avergoon to help him, and Avergoon produced fake invoices. Avergoon also provided him $75,000. Goldstein then wrote 5 checks back to Avergoon and then submitted these backdated checks to the Office of Emergency Services to justify the payment of $75,000. Cal OES paid the Chabad Goldstein $75,000 in March of 2012 based on false invoices created by Mr. Avergoon and backdated checks created by Mr. Goldstein. The third one of these frauds in this group was a fraud against the Clarence Brooks Foundation of Beverly Hills in 2013. Along with another co-conspirator who is still under investigation, Goldstein was advised by that person how to fraudulently obtain a grant from the Clarence Brooks Foundation. False documentation was created alleging non-existent expenses, payroll, and phony profit and loss statements. All were submitted to the foundation to justify a grant of $600,000. Avergoon helped Mr. Goldstein convert the $600,000 to cash, $400,000 of it going to the co-conspirator and $200,000 directly to Mr. Goldstein. The fourth one is another fraud on FEMA and OES. It occurred in 2018. A co-conspirator who is still under investigation produced fraudulent invoices and a phony check made payable to a construction company that was never cashed to obtain a grant from FEMA and OES in the amount of $76,750. That money was used for upgrades at Mr. Goldstein's personal residence. The fraudulently obtained funds were more than $937,000 in grant funds, and he misappropriated $875,000. I want to summarize the case. The conspiracy that you see, those are what we've been discussing for the last 15 minutes. They're all in the factual foundation, which he pled guilty to this morning. His cooperation, as we've said, it started in 2018, and he helped, without question. His cooperation led to this week's 5 guilty pleas. He will cooperate with ongoing investigations and uncharged co-conspirators. He has already forfeited $1 million, and he's agreed to pay restitution in the amount of $2.5 million. The sentencing recommendation that the government will make at the time of sentencing will be probation. The sentencing will be up to the judge. Our recommendation is based on the past and ongoing cooperation, as discussed above, the unique record of his lifetime service. There is no question that he founded the Chabad in 1986, and it has contributed significantly to the community in a positive way for decades.
Really?
His role after the 2019 terrorist attack was exemplary. He became a significant advocate for peace and the elimination of violence based on religious hatred. He spoke all over the world and sent a strong message of peace.
What a joke.
I will briefly discuss the 5 related guilty pleas that occurred this week as a direct result of Mr. Goldstein's cooperation. The first one is United States versus Bruce Baker. Mr. Baker was involved in the 90-10 fraud scheme from the mid-1980s to 2018. At least 2 points.
Damn it.
Was donated to the Chabad of Poway, and at least 2.4 million of that was funneled back to him by Mr. Goldstein. The tax loss to the IRS with this gentleman alone is approximately $644,000. United States versus Bijan Muzazada. I hope I got that right. A 90-10 tax fraud again. From 2012 to 2018, $290,000 donated to the Chabad of Poway, $261,000 funneled back from Goldstein in cash to the defendant. United States versus Yusuf Shimarani. Again, the 90-10 tax evasion scheme. From 2011 to 2016, $137,650 donated, allegedly, to the Chabad that went directly
Barron's
to
Market.
Goldstein. 123 was funneled back. And fourth, United States, Alexander Avergoon. We've already mentioned him at least 3 times. He was involved in the 90-10 tax evasion scheme from 2010 to 2015. He connected Goldstein to at least 9 fraudulent donors who made more than $275,000 in fraudulent donations. He was involved in the grant fraud with Goldstein from 2010 to 2015. He created shell companies and fake invoices to obtain hundreds of thousands of dollars of misappropriated grant funds along with Mr. Goldstein. He was involved in a separate real estate Ponzi scheme from 2010 to 2016, where he cheated retired investors out of approximately $12 million. And last, United States versus Boris Scholar. Again, he was involved in the 90-10 tax evasion scheme from 2015 to 2016. $122,000 were donated, $109,800 funneled back from Goldstein. That's the case. And again, I want to the incredible work that was done by the FBI, the IRS, and this office. I want to commend them, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you at this time the acting SAC of the Federal Bureau of Investigation San Diego office, Omer Mizell.
Thank you, Bob. Good afternoon. My name is Omer Mizell, and I'm the Acting Special Agent in charge of the San Diego Division of the FBI. In 2016, FBI agents began investigating a real estate scam involving Alex Avergoon, the real estate professional who defrauded investors of more than $12 million in a Ponzi scheme. Near the end of the same year, the FBI's fraud investigation identified a relationship between Mr. Avragun and Rabbi Goldstein, a leader of the Chabad of Poway. The investigation revealed that the relationship involved potential criminal activity related to tax fraud or charitable donation scheme involving Rabbi Goldstein and others. Throughout 2017, while continuing to investigate Mr. Avragun real estate fraud, the FBI conducted an extensive investigation, executing, among other things, email search warrants and grand jury subpoenas to gather evidence of this newly identified criminal activity. The agents reviewed communications between the defendants, as well as bank and financial records to gather evidence of the multi-million-dollar scheme. In addition, the FBI worked jointly with the IRS on this investigation, utilizing their expertise and experience to analyze tax filings and other records to corroborate the tax fraud scheme. Subsequently, the investigation expanded to uncover an elaborate fraud scheme, and we worked thoroughly to investigate the complex criminal activity. At the center of the illegal activity was Rabbi Goldstein, who was using his position at the synagogue to carry out the 90-10 charity scheme where the donors received their money back and a large tax deduction. And Rabbi Goldstein personally obtained 10% cut of the monies, which amounted to more than $500,000. The US government and the tax-paying public were ultimately cheated of approximately $1.5 million of tax revenue from the fraudulent donations. Moreover, 3 different Fortune 500 companies were defrauded by being tricked into matching charitable donations of their employees. And the Chabad community, who were the intended beneficiaries of the charitable funds, did not receive the benefit of the donations. As the investigation continued, the FBI utilized an undercover FBI agent to meet with Rabbi Goldstein to further evidence of the fraud scheme. The undercover FBI agent met with Rabbi Goldstein on numerous occasions. During these meetings, Rabbi Goldstein offered to launder money for the undercover agent and did in fact exchange money for the undercover agent, consistent with the 90-10 charitable donation scheme. The FBI undercover operation was a critical investigative technique used to obtain incriminating evidence of Rabbi Goldstein's criminal activity in this investigation. Following these undercover meetings, in October of 2018, FBI agents obtained and executed search warrants at Rabbi Goldstein's home, office, and safety deposit box. Immediately after executing the search warrants, Rabbi Goldstein decided to cooperate with the agents and prosecutors in the investigation. This extensive investigation uncovered over $18 million of complex fraud schemes to include charitable donation fraud, tax fraud, money laundering, real estate Ponzi schemes, government benefit fraud, and wire fraud. The investigation uncovered decades of fraud with a web of complex financial transactions concealed by fraudulent documents, lies, and deceit under the disguise of a charitable organization. Ultimately, 6 subjects were indicted, and all 6 have pled guilty. Today's guilty plea will ensure that Rabbi Goldstein will no longer be able to use his affiliation with the Chabad of Poway to commit crimes and steal money from those who intend to be the recipients of the charitable funds. Regarding Mr. Avragun, after agents approached him, but prior to indictment, Mr. Avragun departed the United States. Agents were able to locate him in Latvia. Upon indictment, the FBI, utilizing its overseas offices and relationships with foreign law enforcement agencies, successfully apprehended Avragun in Latvia in October 2019, and he was subsequently extradited to the United States, where he remains in custody. The investigation is another example of the FBI's commitment to work long-term, multi-year, complex investigations to ensure justice. I want to thank the United States Attorney's Office, the IRS, and the special agents in my office for their dedication, extraordinary work, expertise, and partnership. Together, we were able to bring justice for the American people. Lastly, as you all recall, on April 27th of 2019, an awful and violent anti-Semitic hate crime was perpetrated at the Chabad of Poway. On that infamous day, members of the synagogue, the Jewish community, and Rabbi Goldstein were victims of a heinous hate crime. And so very sadly, Lori Kay tragically lost her life. The FBI worked tirelessly with the United States Attorney's Office, the San Diego Sheriff, and the District Attorney to investigate and ultimately charge the shooter with federal civil rights and hate crime charges. At the time of the shooting, Rabbi Goldstein had been a subject of this fraud investigation for over 2 years and was already cooperating with the investigation. These two distinct investigations were conducted independently, thoroughly, and with the FBI's full dedication. This is a promise the FBI provides to the victims of each and every crime we investigate. This is the commitment and duty we have to the American public. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce IRS Special Agent in Charge, Ryan Corner.
Good afternoon. Honest Americans' contributions to the tax system are critical. 96% of our nation's revenue comes in through the IRS, and a 1% increase or decrease in overall tax compliance equates to approximately $35 billion in revenue to the United States government. The IRS's mission and your compliance with the tax laws are vital to our country. This has been highlighted recently as tax revenues generated by the IRS have continued to fund our nation's critical infrastructures as well as support our citizens and small businesses during the ongoing pandemic. The average American diligently pays the proper amount of tax each year. Rabbi Yisroel Goldstein, on the other hand, abused his position of trust and leadership at a religious organization that has served the community of Poway for years. Rabbi Goldstein conspired with others to intentionally defraud the IRS, the United States, and the Chabad of Poway by fabricating records that facilitated illegal tax deductions for his co-defendants and ultimately resulted in his own personal financial gain. The Chabad of Poway was further victimized in April of 2019 when a shooter entered and attacked worshipers, killing one and wounding several others, including Rabbi Goldstein. We recognize the pain that event caused the Chabad, Rabbi Goldstein, and the entire community. We stand with you as you continue to heal, and we acknowledge the fortitude it took for Rabbi Goldstein and his co-defendants to face their past criminal conduct in the shadows of that terrible event. My name is Ryan Corner. I'm the Special Agent in Charge for IRS Criminal Investigation here in Southern California. On behalf of the IRS, we are honored to partner with the FBI and the United States Attorney's Office on this significant investigation. This week, Rabbi Goldstein and 5 co-defendants, Bijan Muzazadeh, Joseph Shemirani, Boris Scholar, Bruce Baker, and Alex Avergoon all entered their guilty pleas in court. As part of those pleas, Rabbi Goldstein admitted his central role and active participation in a conspiracy to defraud the United States Treasury that spanned many years. Throughout the conspiracy, Rabbi Goldstein worked with at least 18 taxpayers, including the co-defendants, to assist them with the fraudulently lowering of their tax liabilities. Over $6 million in fraudulent donations were accepted by Rabbi Goldstein, resulting in over $1.5 million in lost tax revenue to the United States government. In addition, Rabbi Goldstein participated in other fraud schemes that resulted in a loss to public grant programs and private foundations that totaled over $875,000. The tax law allows taxpayers who donate money to certain public charities to reduce their tax liabilities by deducting those charitable contributions from their taxable income. This long-standing policy promotes charitable giving and benefits the causes that public charities like the Chabad of Poway serve. The tax evasion scheme perpetrated by Rabbi Goldstein and his co-defendants undermines our tax system and jeopardizes the good works of nonprofit and charitable organizations. The IRS has repeatedly warned taxpayers against falsely inflating or overstating charitable contributions, but unfortunately, schemes like this are not new. Rabbi Goldstein and his co-defendants exploited the tax-exempt status given to religious organizations and violated our nation's laws to avoid paying their fair share and ultimately to put more money in their own pockets, all under the guise of charity. The IRS is committed to serving the American public by investigating criminal violations of the tax code as well as financial frauds that victimize our people and our institutions. The hard work of our dedicated special agents and professional staff will not stop despite the ongoing challenges posed by COVID-19. We will continue to work alongside our law enforcement partners, and today's 6 guilty pleas demonstrate our collective efforts to continue enforcing the law and to ensure the public trust. In parting, on the eve of tax day, I would like to warn those who seek to exploit the special status given to nonprofits, those who create or participate in schemes that mislead and defraud the United States in order to evade their taxes. The IRS will work tirelessly to hold you accountable. If you choose to cheat the system, you will be caught and you will face severe consequences, including substantial financial penalties and prison. Before I turn over the microphone to Assistant United States Attorney Emily Allen to answer your questions, I want to formally thank Special Agent in Charge Mizell with the FBI for the continued outstanding collaboration with his team, as well as United States Attorney Brewer and Assistant United States Attorney Emily Allen, Andrew Young, and Sasha Johnson for the amazing partnership with their office. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. We'll now open it to questions. I'd like to introduce Assistant United States Attorney Emily Allen, the lead prosecutor on this case. Any questions?
All right, you've been listening to this news conference there by the U.S. Attorney's Office, of course, the IRS. They're going to be taking questions, but I want to recap exactly what they said there. Again, this is the Chabad of Poway Rabbi Yisroel Goldstein pleading guilty to tax fraud, also wire fraud, this conspiracy dating back to 2010. He's been cooperating in this investigation since October of 2018. It also led to 5 other people being indicted in this conspiracy. We'll have much more on this story, of course, on later editions of Fox 5 News. We're going to take a short break.
You're watching